Sweetie, you handle the hippies, I'll handle the off-brand Yahweh.
Kick his ass, Dad.
Bear witness. Now you see my true form.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This is going to be my Rick and Morty Season 4 Episode 9 video. There were a bunch of Easter eggs, so we'll break it all down. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos. We'll do a Rick and Morty merch giveaway. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and leave your favorite Easter egg from the episode on the video. Careful for spoilers. If you have not seen the episode yet, we'll do top 10 WTF and Easter eggs as we go along, starting with number 10. The title of the episode, which is Childrick of Morty, which is a reference to the early 2000s movie Children of Men, which is all about there being one pregnant woman on the planet. Obviously, in this episode, it was a planet being pregnant. But the actual plot of the episode didn't really have a ton in common with the plot of the movie, other than the fact that the main character doesn't have any biological relation to the woman and the child that he's trying to take care of during the episode, just like we find out that Rick doesn't have any relation to the children that he's trying to take care of. Number 9, family vacation. Most of the story revolves around the idea that the family is on a spring break vacation camping trip on Earth, Jerry demanding everyone rough it so that he can feel needed. Whatever it is they do, they convince Rick that he has to go along with it too, and it seems like he begrudgingly joins them. When the episode picks up with them in the car, though, you can actually see they've kind of gone full National Lampoon's Vacation. The station wagon that they drive is actually made to look like the station wagon from that movie, if you didn't notice before. It's always looked like this. I guess that would make Jerry the Chevy Chase of this scenario, even though technically Rick is the main character along with Morty, so the dynamic isn't quite perfect, but you do kind of have that Chevy Chase Beverly D'Angelo vibe going on with Jerry and Beth, just at each other's throats, but also loving each other throughout the entire episode. Just this incredibly dysfunctional relationship that they have. Summer apparently has a friend that's named after a cracker, Mike Triscutt. She makes a reference to HBO's Euphoria series, which is mostly a show about younger kids doing a ton of club drugs together, getting into trouble. If you've seen Harmony Korine's 90s movie Kids or Requiem for a Dream, it'd be like HBO turning those movies into TV series. We learned back during Season 3 that Summer really just wants to get high all the time, which she does a lot during this episode, huffing the spaceship equivalent of brake fluid. Morty spends the entire episode being obsessed with playing his video games because he's 14. That's pretty normal for a 14-year-old. They actually made a reference earlier this season to the fact that his character is written to be very on brand for 14-year-olds. Number 8, though, Rick's booty call. So he gets a phone call from an actual planet that he calls Gaia. Turns out even sentient planets have smartphones that they can use to communicate across celestial bodies. He MacGyvers himself a Faraday box to try and duck her call until Beth demands that they go. Beth references Rick abandoning her as a child again. This is the first real episode in Season 4 when they've done the Beth, Rick, father-daughter storyline like they did during Season 3, Episode 9. Dan and Justin have said that they don't have any really big plans to answer every single question about Rick's backstory ever. But based on what Bird Person told Morty during Season 2, a lot of Rick's time away from his family when Beth was growing up, when she says that he abandoned her, that was time he spent mostly fighting in intergalactic wars, getting wasted, and screwing around, presumably after his wife was gone. And he's already admitted to that being his unhealthy way of dealing with his trauma. And speaking of Rick's wife, we still don't have any more answers about what happened to her, just the fake memories that Rick used to trick the galactic government. So right now it's even odds as to whether or not she's still alive out there somewhere in some dimension, or if she really did die. We find out that Rick modified the station wagon to turn it into a spaceship. This is the first time we've seen this, but it doesn't seem like it should be a huge surprise, given how much he's modified the house with defensive and offensive technology. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point he reveals that the entire house itself is capable of transforming into a spaceship. I love that he built a function that swaps his seat with Jerry's like he planned for this specific scenario in advance, knowing that he was going to have to go on a family car trip with them. When the spaceship transforms, it actually looks a little bit more like the car that Homer Simpson designed on The Simpsons with the wings. Then number 7, Rick reveals that he actually screwed a planet. Dan Harmon said that this was how the episode actually started in the writer's room. What if Rick did it with a planet and joked that some writer that day just didn't feel like doing any work, so they threw out the most ridiculous sounding premise possible, and they just decided to run with it and see if they could actually turn it into a real episode. Rick tries to explain his kink away by just saying that he's a scientist, he experiments because that's what scientists do. Later they kind of bring that joke back around in the post-credit scene when Summer catches him watching the planetary version of Tinder as if he really is getting off on it. Most of the time when Rick does crazy stuff like this, it's just to prove that he's capable of doing it, like he wants to impress other people, despite the fact that he says he doesn't care about that kind of stuff. Just be impressed, Morty. Then number 6, the Gaia planet gives live birth, just like a mammal would. The writers didn't really qualify or explain the logic behind this story beat, like why would a planet actually give live birth? I guess you could say it has something to do with the fact that it's different because it's a sentient planet. It's kind of like an Ego the Living Planet situation where it can actually control itself the way that Ego can control his form. They get really phallic with their description of snakes, and even though Beth is the one that's driving most of this plot early in the episode, Rick is not wrong when he suggests that they just bail and let evolution handle the parenting. All of Beth's efforts are predicated on the idea that Rick is actually the father of all these children, and she's just transferring all of her repressed traumatic childhood memories of abandonment onto these alien creatures. So the fact remains at the end of the episode, had they just listened to Rick and never answered that phone call, everything would have been fine. Because as we later learn, the kids aren't even his to begin with, so he has no responsibility to them. And even though a lot of times he comes off in this really terrible, cold, unfeeling way, he actually does say later in the episode, "I'm the guy that showed up and actually tried to raise your kids." That's just a way to show you that he's not really that unfeeling or uncaring. He really does care about his family, despite what he says. In a rare moment of solidarity, Jerry agrees with Rick on something, that they should just totally bail, but I love that Beth clearly still has a lot of issues with Jerry that they haven't dealt with, despite getting back together at the end of Season 3. Every day is a vacation when you're unemployed. Summer has the most epic takedown of Jerry, and Morty attributes her behavior to her extended time with Rick, but she's been like this for a long time, so I don't totally think that it's Rick's influence to blame for her temper. Then when they split off the storylines, number 5, Rick and Beth create their civilization together as a bonding adventure. Papa bless. They actually do grow closer together. It's like a longer version of their arc during Season 3, Episode 9, where they start at each other's throats. Then by the end of the episode, they have this bonding moment and they come back together. During this whole montage, the writers try to make as many generic cultural jokes and references to TV and movie tropes as possible, discussing their plans for how to evolve the children into a full-blown society. Like, you have all these different pipes and valves feeding different personalities and job functions. Like, the civilization will only work if they feed all these tropes from movies and TV shows. Like making sure that all their lawyers avoid the ethics tubes, and the joke about routing athletes so that they can bully mathematicians, forcing them to evolve into astronomers. Like, that's the only way to make someone want to be an astronomer. They use this pinball metaphor to make a whole bunch of Earth conspiracy jokes. That's actually a real problem on YouTube that Google had to address a while ago. If you can believe it, there are a lot of people out there that genuinely don't know that the Earth is round. The Middle Earth joke is just a Lord of the Rings reference. The joke here about drama writers is that they're all abused at some point in their life, and that's what makes them want to become drama writers, so the machine here just spanks them super hard before sending them into this section. They make a huge joke about therapists needing a whole bunch of hardcore family nudes in order to be effective therapists. 20% isn't enough. Then I love the joke about all the unproductives, the Jerrys, the DJs, the foodies, the influencers. When Rick jokes about recirculating them through the quote-unquote system, that's just a reference to those people bouncing through their lives having hundreds of non-jobs. They make a big dig about online college being completely useless when she says that the workaround to keep the unproductives busy is the same as just shooting them out a tube in the back to a dump. Because this is Dan Harmon and he also made Community, the TV show, you could also call this a Community reference. Jerry proves how inept he is when he winds up falling into the river after hitting himself with a rock because he can't even skip rocks properly. That's how dumb he is. The reason why the system determines that Jerry is a worthless unproductive is just because it was built by Rick and Beth, so it reflects their values, and they think that he's worthless right now, so that's why the system just spits him out into the worthless tube. Then number 4, Jerry becomes the leader of his own tribe of throwaways. The unproductives at this point in their life cycle are so unevolved that Jerry seems wise by comparison with his s'mores, so they just treat him like he's a god or something. And of course, it goes straight to his head. But we get another original song sung by Dan Harmon. This isn't one of my favorites so far, but usually a couple times a season, Rick and Morty comes up with some cool original songs. One of the funnier things during this montage, though, you notice, is that the aliens patterned themselves to look like Jerry's shirt's pattern, but then Jerry loses the shirt and copies them, not realizing that they were trying to copy him in the first place. The moment he gets pissed at one of them for inventing a cabin is the moment that the aliens start to evolve past him, like they're actually getting smarter by the minute. Later in the episode, Rick implies that this is going to continue to be a problem until the aliens eventually do really threaten his life, at which point he'll just blow their ship up. Then number 3, Morty and Summer's spaceship. The alien ship that they find crashed is actually designed to look like the exterior of the Enterprise E from Star Trek The Next Generation movies. Summer reminds Morty, if I die, please don't eat my ass, because apparently that's something that she needs to warn him about. When they suggest mind slugs and nebulas that make people see their own fears, that's the writers just implying that there have been other adventures that they've been on with Rick in the past that we haven't seen in episodes yet. But this is meant to be about how dumb Morty and Summer really are, with him thinking the hyper-advanced spaceship controls are just like his Nintendo Switch video games and Trisha's bong. But as Rick says later in the episode, it's totally okay for them to be dumb teenagers like that because they are teenagers. He doesn't expect them to be super smart like he is. And when you really think about it, Summer is just looking for any excuse to get high. She'll puff on anything. Then number 2, Rick versus God. We find out that Rick is actually pretty good at karaoke for at least certain songs that are in his register. He makes a Lion King Circle of Life joke, which is obviously Disney reference. They reference the Disney Channel later in the episode too. The whole subplot with Rick fighting the god, though, is a way to give Rick an out, because they don't actually want to end the episode with Rick having a bunch of biological children on another planet they abandoned. Rick uses his technology to replicate a form of the god's powers, which is just a reference to Season 3 when Morty called Rick a really messed up kind of god. Rick says that he's a Zeus, and implies later in the episode that there are actually multiple Zeuses, like he was a Zeus, as if there are more out there somewhere. The fact that the fight just keeps going on and on is just a reference to the fight from They Live between Rowdy Roddy Piper and a young Keith David, who you all know is the voice of the President and a bunch of other Rick and Morty characters. I love this whole bit with Summer huffing the brake fluid, getting super high, inventing the controls, telling Morty what to draw on the dashboard. To their credit, they do wind up getting the ship into orbit and wind up saving Rick, even if it's only by accident. But then Summer throws up all over the place. Morty gets some in his mouth, making him high too. Their eyes actually look kind of similar to Rick's blue eyes when he was doing the crystals back in Season 1. This is a little bit more hardcore though. Morty kind of does the same thing he did in last week's episode when he tries to find a moral lesson in their misadventures, but just like Rick did last week after he did that, he tells Morty, no, that's not the lesson. The lesson is that video games and partying are great, so just keep doing those things. But the fact that he tells them he's never going to sell them out, then promptly sells them out 5 minutes later, is more the writers just shining a light on the idea that even though Rick seems like he has all the answers most of the time, he also lies about stuff all the time. So don't take everything he says super seriously. Probably about as close as you would get to a G.I. Joe knowing is half the battle message from this show. Rick jokes about Summer huffing brake fluid, then promptly takes a puff himself just for fun, because sure, why not? When the alien tells Jerry to use the s'more, it's just a Star Wars use the Force reference. When Rick says if this was the real God, it'd be a completely different story, he's kind of implying that they would actually have a chance at killing the real God. They bookend the whole metaphor on parenting in the episode with Rick's speech talking to the alien about, whether or not he's good or bad, he's the parent that actually showed up to raise her kids. Jerry acknowledges he was wrong to try and force his lifestyle on Morty and Summer, and then they acknowledge that they have been treating him really badly. They effectively reset the family dynamic to what it was at the beginning of the episode, with Rick's status in the family being way lower, Beth supporting Jerry, and Rick just hating being stuck on a family trip with them. So the reason he throws Morty and Summer under the bus, selling them out, is just so he can take down Beth and Jerry a peg so they don't feel so high and mighty about being amazing parents. See how terrible you are, look at all the terrible things that they did. He also kind of implies that Summer's gonna die in 3 days after doing all that brake fluid unless he does something about it, and then makes fun of the Disney Channel and Morty for being really dumb. The number 1 WTF, that whole post-credit scene with Rick getting caught watching Tinder for planets on his laptop. All the things that the planets are saying are actually scientific terms, it's just that they're saying them in super funny, sexy, salacious voices, and apparently this is Rick's new kink, just bringing the joke from earlier back around in the episode. Earlier he said that he was doing this because he was curious, he's a scientist, I experiment, which we now know is a lie because of the way he smiles after Summer calls him out on it, like he really does get off on this. It was kind of a weird concept for an episode. I don't know if it's going to wind up being one of my favorites, but if you spotted any big Easter eggs in the episode that I didn't mention in the video, just write them below in the comments. Big reminder though that next week is going to be the Rick and Morty Season 4 finale, so I'll do a trailer video for that tomorrow. As long as you have alerts enabled for my channel, you should see that video when I post it. But everyone click here for all my Rick and Morty episodes, and click here for my new Marvel Wolverine video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, I'll see you guys tonight.